Okay, I'm glad as many of you are here, were able to come to the forum. The League of Women Voters is doing the same kind of introduction at quite a few of the neighborhood associations, and we're happy to do it. First of all, I want to give you some general information about the election, which I'm sure you know is November 8th. There's going to be the mayoral candidate, and then each ward has one of their two council people voted on every other year. So these will be the candidates in Ward 1. There'll be 3 items on the ballot: the mayoral election, the ward election, and the one you probably haven't heard much about is the fire station bond issue of $5.74 million. And they're going to do 3 things with that money. They annexed the Linda Vista area, so they're interested in building a fire station out in that area someplace. They're going to tear down the fire station that's on Mount Avenue, a couple blocks west of Higgins, because it just has too small. The fire engines have gotten too big for the building, so they're going to raise that and build a new one. And the third adjustment they will be making is on the fire station at the corner of Hillview Way and 39th Street. And they need to enlarge that one. So that will be on the ballot. Now, your neighborhood association decided just to have the ward candidates, which is fine. In case the mayoral candidates don't come for a few minutes, the league is sponsoring a forum that'll be on MCAT on November 3rd at the school administration building at 915 South Avenue. So you can either attend or sit home and watch it in your living room. Now, do remember that you need to take ID to the polls. Some people didn't realize that that was necessary for every election. You can take either picture ID, like a driver's license or a Costco card, or a government card, or anything that shows your name and address. If you aren't going to be in town or are working on election day, you could pick up absentee ballots. They'll be available later this week. And here are some cards. If you want to mail them in, you mail them in and they'll send you one by mail. Or you can go down to the courthouse any day and fill in your ballot right there. And they will not be counted till election day, but you can vote on it between now and then. I think that's all the background information that I can remember on the elections. They get more complicated each year. So now we're going to start with the candidates forum. And the format we've decided on is each candidate will get a 3-minute introductory statement. Then we have the questions that you've been filling out that we'll be sorting through. And we'll ask them, and each person can take up to 2 minutes to answer each question. And then we'll see how this goes. And in about an hour or so, if there aren't any more questions, they'll have 3 minutes closing, and we'll see what happens. We didn't decide who gets to go first. How do you guys want to do it? Alphabetically, or somebody say a number.
I got a coin here.
Okay, flip. I forgot that detail until this minute. Okay, heads or tails, you gotta call them.
Heads. Tails it is.
Okay, Dave Strohmeyer, candidate.
Well, thanks to the Upper and Lower Rattlesnake Neighborhood Councils, the League of Women Voters, for hosting this event tonight. I'm Dave Strohmeyer, candidate for City Council, Ward 1. I currently work professionally as a historian for a consulting firm here in town. I'm president of the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association. I'm someone that cares deeply about Missoula. Prior to my current professional commitments, I worked for nearly 19 years for both the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service in a variety of roles. first as a wildland firefighter, then for a unit of the U.S. Forest Service that specialized in the analysis of public comment and public involvement. Other public aspects of my life that I've been involved with over the years that preceded my involvement with the federal government included work as a wildland firefighter and structural firefighter for a rural fire district and as an emergency medical technician. I'm running for city council basically for 3 reasons. First, I think Missoula is a vital and vibrant community, and I want to make sure that it stays that way and even improves as we move into the 21st century. I want this to be a place that I can take pride in for my son to grow up in. Secondly, I think civic involvement is an important thing for all citizens of this community and other communities across our country. And to the extent possible, I think it's important to involve oneself in what goes on in one's community. And finally, I think we're all familiar with some of the acrimony and polarization that we've seen go on in city council as of late, city government as of late. And I want to contribute positively to mitigating some of that negative energy, if you will. I want to do my best to restore city council to a deliberative body that truly knows how to engage in civic and civil dialogue between its members, between itself and other aspects, other spheres of city government, and between itself and the general public. I think that meaningful engagement in the public process is important for all of us, and I would do my best, drawing upon my varied experience in the federal government and community involvement here in my neighborhood association, to bring a positive force to the council to really move us ahead in a constructive manner in the next 4 years and beyond. So thank you again for being here tonight and for inviting me to participate.
Good evening. My name's Cass Chinsky. I'm also running for Ward 1 and for City Council. That's a good question. Why would anybody want to run for a job where you have to spend all your Monday evenings going through some of the difficult things that Luann's been doing for 9 years? You would have to be very serious about it to do it, because I do know what I'm getting into. I've sat in that position 2 different times. My background, I grew up in the Midwest. I worked out in San Francisco for 3 years from '69 to '71 as a marketing manager for a large corporation. Moved to Missoula in January of '72, and I did what traditionally most people did to earn a living here at that time. I worked in the mills. Early on after that, I became involved in the project that we're going to celebrate tomorrow, the Rattlesnake Wilderness. I spent 10 years professionally working on that project. And then I spent another 7 years as a professional conservationist running another conservation group and doing consulting mostly on wilderness issues. I now am a real estate broker in Missoula. I have my own business. I have 3 people that work underneath me, and it's turned into a successful business. Why would I want to come back after a period of time and get involved in the community? Well, actually, I haven't left. For the last 30 years, I've been involved in this community in many, many different ways. And I became very much involved again about 7, 8 years ago, and the advent of Growth Management 1 for Missoula. And I think that's basically the source of what Dave really recognized as a source of friction, discontent, and difference of opinion in this community. It started about 7, 8 years ago. And I've been very, very much involved with trying to work with this issue. We all are aware of some of the negative effects of some of the infill that have gone on in this community. That's what brought me back to politics, the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods, I believe, are the most important thing. If we're going to talk about vitality in Missoula, we have to take care of our neighborhoods. That's where people live. That's where people vest themselves in the biggest investment in their life. And most of us that are fortunate enough to do that really feel that way. So I bring a lot of experience and knowledge and background, and I would hopefully represent this ward and the interests of this ward well.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have something for me? Okay, question number 1. What specific personal experience do you have in Missoula city government, local boards? How will this experience benefit Ward 1 and city residents if elected? Cass, why don't you start first this time since you got second?
Well, not to be redundant, I spent 8 years on city council. I was elected twice to the body that I'm trying to be returned to, and so I do understand the functionings of government. I've been there. I've also served as a planning board member. I've also served as a park board member. I've also served as a animal control board member. That's an interesting one. You ought to try that one. I also served on the Largemount Golf Course Board, and so I've had a variety of board experiences. I've also served on some short-term interim boards that the city and the university put up about 5 years ago when we were dealing with the occupancy standard, and I also served on the zoning issues subcommittee, was appointed by the city council, and that was a 15-month to look at the issues that we're all dealing with now.
As I mentioned earlier, I currently serve as president of the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association and have been very active in the Eastside neighborhood, which, for any of you who aren't aware of that neighborhood in town, it extends from the Clark Fork River on the south to the railroad tracks on the north, Patty Street on the west, and Rattlesnake Creek on the east. As part of that organization, we've tried to be a voice for our neighborhood, a neighborhood that's very diverse, that's very densely populated, that includes a lot of renters, a lot of very few homeowners actually, but trying to be an advocate for that diverse group of folks. As part of that organization, one of the recent projects that we've been lobbying for, which I'll continue to lobby for on council, is some improvements to infrastructure, to connectivity down at the intersection of Madison Street and Greeno Drive. You're probably all familiar with the bottleneck at the railroad tracks there and just the problems with transportation in that particular hub. That's an aspect of our neighborhood that I've been working very hard to try to see implemented and improved. In addition, we've been a voice for the neighborhood in collaborating with and working towards seeing some positive improvement in relations with the Business Improvement District, which is just formed downtown. We were successful in lobbying for some exemptions to residential homeowners such that they didn't have to pay some of the very steep assessments that businesses in the downtown neighborhood would have to. Besides that, I think my experience with federal government here in Missoula and elsewhere in the West will be directly applicable to local government and local community issues, particularly my involvement in the public involvement and public participation realm of federal government.
Thank you, Dave. What do you think is the most pressing issue facing the Rattlesnake area and pressing issue for the city of Missoula? And how would you address these issues? Reverse order?
I think first and foremost, keeping our eye focused on one central issue, and that is how does Missoula remain and try to be a sustainable community into the 21st century? And by that I mean environmental sustainability, ecological sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. Sustainability in that sense means how do we live within our means as a community? How do we not eat up those very values which are the reasons why so many of us have chosen to live here and remain here if we grew up here, or move here if we came from somewhere else? One of the key issues surrounding sustainability, I believe, is growth and development. Given the rapid pace and scale of change that we're seeing throughout the Missoula Valley, the Rattlesnake, other neighborhoods within Ward 1 included, how do we not ask Tom Bodette to put up or turn out the light and put up the no vacancy sign, but at the same time, not degrade the very values that are at the heart of this community: open space conservation, clean air, clean water, quality parks, neighborhood continuity and integrity. My background as a historian tells me that neighborhoods are very important, and I think Cass is right. The historic character of our neighborhoods is one reason why so many of us live in the places we do, and we need to be sensitive to that. We need to ensure that comprehensive plans that have been established, neighborhood plans that have been established to oversee growth and development in Missoula are respected and not undermined. And we need to ensure that the public is involved in that process of deciding and visioning where we want to go into the future.
Well, I think in a very general sense, the most important issue facing Missoula is growth management. And what are we trying to manage? We're trying to manage our air, our water, our safety, our environment, whether or not we have any open space left when we're maxed out on growth. How far can we grow and sustain it? How much can we grow? How much can we afford it? Growth management, it's not a well understood term, because if it was, we wouldn't still be talking about it. And I think that we need to delve into it a little bit more and look at what are we trying to protect. And it may be that we can't have that many slices of the pie and still have a good community. That will be the #1 issue for quite a while. How do we manage this growth that is coming at us? And how do we do it successfully? And if I told you I had all the answers to that, that would be untrue. I have some good inclinations of what we need to do and how to do it, and I'm sure we're going to get into some more of those issues in detail tonight.
Third question. Where do you stand on implementing zoning for the Upper Rattlesnake? Would you support enacting zoning based on the neighborhood wants and not on what, quote, City Hall thinks?
Neighborhood plans, if we have one in your neighborhood, are very important. It's what the neighbors want. Now, I think we have a long way to go in this ward to develop better neighborhood plans, but the answer is, what about the densities where you live? Who's going to decide that? Is it going to be the city coming down on you and telling you what it's going to be, either through an extension of a sewer, conflicting water quality with density, because those are two different issues? Or is it going to be so that the neighbors in where you live, in your neighborhood, are you going to be able to have the biggest influence on what your neighborhood looks like? Well, my opinion is you should. So I think if the neighborhood is very clear in a majority of how they want their neighborhood to grow or not to grow, then I'm going to listen to that. I think that's the most important thing to listen to.
I think zoning is absolutely critical for those areas in the Rattlesnake that currently are not zoned, and there are some, and I think we're going to be seeing those parcels embroiled in controversy in the days and weeks to come. Let's start getting these unzoned areas zoned, and let's tier the zoning to the neighborhood plans. If neighborhood plans need to be strengthened and modified or adjusted, Let's get the job done. Let's get the zoning done that tiers to those plans. And let's ensure that the public is involved in that process. I'd love more than anything to see this room completely filled with people and spilling over outside to discuss how we want our community here in the Rattlesnake, downtown, out Easy Street, other areas in town outside of Ward 1, how we want these areas to look. Public involvement is key to that. I think the city needs to be cognizant of and sensitive to the concerns of neighborhoods in our community, and let's get the job done as far as zoning and neighborhood planning goes.
Thank you, Dave. Growth is happening in Missoula. Should each ward share an equal responsibility welcoming this growth, or should some wards receive more of the growth? If so, which ones? Dave?
Obviously not Ward 1. Well, I think I think those of us in the room are aware, as much as anyone in this community, that some wards, some neighborhoods in town already are doing their fair share, I think, of shouldering the burden of some of our density and growth that we've seen. Not all wards, not all neighborhoods are created equal from the sense of being exactly the same. There's issues here in the Rattlesnake, in the upper Rattlesnake, particularly I'm thinking of conservation issues that are unique to Ward 1 that may not be seen down in wards that include areas such as the University District. We are butting up against wildlands in the upper Rattlesnake. That's something very unique here that needs to be factored into the equation of how much density in any given place ought to be allowed. So as far as picking out specific wards that maybe ought to be shouldering more growth, I think we have to face it. There are areas out to the west of town that are going to, whether we like it or not, absorb some growth in undeveloped agricultural areas. I want to do my best as a city council member to ensure that those folks who are landowners have options, that they don't feel as if their only option is to sell out to a developer. If they want to keep it in agricultural use, if they want to keep it as open space, let's provide the tools to them to do so. But certainly those are some of the areas on the periphery of town where I think we're going to see the majority of growth. We're not going to cram into the central core of the city the amount of growth that we're seeing on the perimeter.
Would you please read that question again?
Growth is happening in Missoula. Should each ward share an equal responsibility welcoming, in quotes, this growth? Or should some wards receive more of the growth? If so, which ones?
I don't think I think that way. I don't like the logic there in that statement. I think that the free market determines where people build their houses, whether there's available lot, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But zoning is really the rules. What do the rules say? What do the rules say? What are your zoning? How many places can be built there? That's how growth will be determined if it's done correctly. And it'll be determined by subdivisions that come in through public review and what standards we want to impose or ask on them, and what benefit it is to the public. Growth is not a good thing it's just on itself. I think we need to look at that. I think we all deep in our hearts know that. So we have to be very careful, again, how we manage growth. And I can't make that question fit into my way of thinking of reality. It's just, we don't have that much detending it. You're going to take this percentage and this percentage. This will never work this way. And that's why we have wards, because there's differences in this community. And we have to, I'm going to prioritize Ward 1. And it's diverse. We have downtown, we have Hellgate Canyon, and we have here. And talking about the sensitivity of the upper half of the Rattlesnake, I'm very understanding what's going on around there in those open spaces. I've been studying and working on those for 30-some years, and all the growth will have an impact on that. It's just that how much can we control? Where will it actually stop? And so we have to be very mindful as we're going.
Please describe your vision for development of a 7-acre lot in the Upper Rattlesnake that is on the bus line and the sewer, currently zoned to 2 dwellings per acre. As a follow-up, how many total dwellings would you find suitable for such a parcel?
Can you read that one again? There's 7 acres that has this that is zoned for 2 acres, two dwellings per acre.
Right.
And so they're asking what should be the maximum densities allowed? Is that kind of the gist of the question?
I happened to look in Sunday's paper, and there's a parcel that they're trying to rezone, I think is the issue.
Okay.
And it's right up near Lincoln Hill, Lincoln
And
Wood.
it's zoned 2 dwellings per acre.
That's what it says
And
here.
there's 7 acres. Well, I think first you have to be able to analyze how much is going to go into streets and right-of-ways and subtract that before you get your lots, and then you won't have 7 acres to work with. You may have about 5. You may have about 5.5. And so if the zoning is 2 dwellings per acre and you got 5.5, that comes out to 11 development sites, according to the rules. Doesn't it? Is that the question? What?
They just want to know what your number is. If it is 2 dwellings per acre, I think the question, what is the maximum would you like to see?
Well, the
on this
maximum
lot?
isn't what I'd like to see. It's what the zoning says, and it says 2 dwellings per acre. And that's simple math, unless it goes through a planned unit development and they get some kind of bonus from it. But if it was the 7 acres with all the streets in and 7 acres of lots, then there's 14 development sites there according to the zoning, if you do it conventionally.
Well, first I would want to ask what is called for in the Rattlesnake Comprehensive Plan? And second, tiered to that, what is the zoning? If the current zoning is 2 dwellings, 2 lots per acre, 2 dwelling units per acre, maybe I need a calculator with logarithms for this, but I think that comes out to 14 units. Of course, that doesn't take into account some of the extenuating circumstances that Cass has mentioned that might very well play into what actually happens on the ground. Now, it's another question whether the neighbors, whether the developer wants to rezone it. There's a public process for that. If the developer, if neighbors think that the zoning is incorrect, either up or down in terms of density, then I think that needs to be taken seriously and considered in terms of whether rezoning is appropriate. There are tools such as PUDs that could be employed to deviate somewhat in terms of density from what the standard zoning might be, but I think basically we need to abide by the zoning, abide by the comprehensive plan, unless we go through those public processes to deviate. I would also say that ideally in any sort of development like this, particularly when we're talking about areas that are undeveloped wildlands essentially in the Upper Rattlesnake, my preference would be to see the development clustered in some way as opposed to spread out, taking up every square inch of that 7-acre lot, or 7 acres in total.
Thank you. What are you going to do about the lack of law enforcement, the failure to enforce leash laws, and the terrible assaults that are increasing in number? Increase police patrols. I guess that's all it was.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that. Here a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to do a ride-along as a citizen observer with the police department, and that's something I would encourage everyone in this room, if you have the inclination and time, to go ahead and do. It was a real eye-opener seeing our police force in action, and honestly, I was extremely impressed by the professionalism and the hard work that our police force does. I had the opportunity to be out homecoming evening, so you can imagine some of the activity in downtown Missoula. Now, I juxtapose that next to some of what I've been hearing on the doors from folks. Why do I not see more police patrols, folks catching speeders up Greeno Drive, up Rattlesnake Drive? Well, I can tell you the reason why. On any given evening, notwithstanding when the shifts overlap, there's only 6 police officers patrolling the entirety of Missoula. And on a busy weekend evening, those are all taken up very oftentimes with problems in the downtown area. The bar scene is amazing. We were out till 2:30 at night, and we could barely squeeze through some of the intersections because of folks spilling out of the bars. So there's one example where I think definitely we need to think about how our police force is structured in terms of personnel. Do we have enough personnel to service all of Missoula, or are we draining all of our services into the downtown area on busy nights? As far as some of the violent assaults that we've seen, that troubles me greatly. Certainly prevention begins at a young age in our school system. I don't have any good answers. I would like to hear from the community, from folks in city government, from our police officers in terms of how we might go approaching those sorts of problems. Arsonists in the Rattlesnake in downtown, that's another issue that troubles me greatly. I'm open to suggestions.
When I was on city council, I was the chairman of what then was the Police and Fire Committee, which is now Public Safety. So I have a pretty good understanding of how the police department works, and I have gone out many times with the police. The problem that you're talking about as far as the violence downtown is another part of growth management. We have an incredible night scene downtown, and it's getting very violent. We all are reading the paper, and we know that. The police tell me, because I've asked them, they need 6 more officers at night. 6 more. And they're not going to get them, but that's what they really need. And it's a growth management issue. We have so many people coming into Missoula during the day and especially at night to entertain themselves in what Missoula offers. And that's a matter of whether we prioritize our budget. And they are servicing a community much larger than Missoula every day. Much, much larger. And the leash law stuff, I noticed you didn't answer that one. That's a hard one. The leash law it's a real hard one. I think that it's been, I hear the same thing. I've heard it since I was on city council, the dog issues. But probably the only way we can do anything about that is to increase the fines and then once in a while nail somebody. It seems like that is the only way that some people understand that it is inappropriate. So it will always be with us, believe me, but maybe we can do something better. And that's one I wouldn't promise to be able to solve.
What are your plans for promoting the Bitterroot Railroad branch line into a commuter line in the future?
Well, I'll call up Denny and see what he'll do. I think that we will see that in the next 10 years by necessity. We all can see the writing on the wall. And so I think, like everything else, the change in habits come by necessity, and I think we're getting close to necessity. So we should be planning for that now. Obviously, that's an incredibly good idea. It's there. It will cost money, but we're going to need that someday. So the first thing I do is will oppose any abandonment of that railroad. That's the first thing you do, so it's there. And make them maintain it. And keep it open, because we're going to need it someday. It's going to be very important. Transportation is a big issue, and it's going to become a much bigger issue as we grow again. And rapid transit is going to be important, especially in the Bitterroot Valley.
Lest I give the appearance that I'm avoiding canines, I agree that indeed increased fines associated with violation of the leash law and enforcement is certainly in order. As far as transportation goes, absolutely. I think the sooner that we get in front of the power curve on this one and think creatively about transportation options, besides just the traditional modes of transportation that we certainly need to attend to, such as rail transit, I think is vital and important. I would want to see that at the first and foremost segment of our conversation about transportation issues in Missoula. I also would agree with Cass that a component of that is that we don't abandon the infrastructure that would allow such rail transit down the road. Let's keep it in place. Let's talk as a community about how to make it happen. Money is certainly going to be a huge issue, and part of that, ridership is going to be a part of that. How do we promote adequate ridership to support that sort of service? But certainly, I think that's important, and I would love to also see the old Union Pacific Northern Pacific station downtown reutilized once again for Amtrak and transcontinental service.
This question didn't come with definitions, so you'll have to figure out your own. Do you consider yourself to be either a new urbanist or a progressive?
I consider myself to be progressive on many issues, conservative on other issues. From a conservative standpoint, I think conservation is a key issue. Conserving those values that are core to our community, not using up the natural capital, the human capital, in the process of changing and growing into the future. Again, I would say as a historian, someone who's spent a good bit of time in the realm of historic preservation, I think there's aspects of our community that are important to hang on to and not sell down the road for the sake of progress and change. On the flip side of the coin, I think we need to be open to change in our community. Change isn't always a bad thing. Change isn't always a good thing. Oftentimes it's a very destructive element. But as we move forward into the future, how are we going to embrace those aspects of change that really nurture and sustain and promote those values, which are the reasons why we live here in the first place? Progress is not necessarily a bad thing, and I think particularly, and I look in terms of my background in conservation, ecosystems are dynamic entities. There's change all across the board, and we can also see that change within our communities. The Missoula of today is not the Missoula of our grandfathers, of our great-grandmothers, and in many respects, it's for the better because of that. We don't dump our sewage directly into the Clark Fork River. We have improved in many respects. We've got a long ways to go, but in the process, I certainly want to hang on to those aspects of our community that we value.
New urbanism. I don't know how many people here are generally aware what that means. How many people know what that concept means? Okay. Well, I think I know what it means. So I'll explain what I think I know it means. It's something that has come out of the 90s. It's come out of geography departments, planning departments. It's a way of taking urban areas and looking at them and retooling them for the future. But of course, in doing that, you have to assume certain values and certain things that you will maybe obtain and what you will give up. And so it's a very scientific way sociological way of creating your urban environment. And I think there's probably some really good ideas in it. I've watched it implemented for the past 10 years in this town since the 90s. The Growth Management 1 plan incorporates a lot of new urbanism techniques. Most of them appeared as the infill techniques that we've witnessed for the last 5-6 years. Density bonuses, neighborhood clusters, and innovative thing about our new urbanism is they used boundary line relocations to accomplish a lot of that. That was what made the mixture good. And so that's what I would classify for the Missoula type of new urbanism. So I'm not very much in favor of it, actually. I'm not very impressed with the values lost and the gains that I see or lack of gains. So I described myself to the Missoulian about 4 months ago as a conservative progressive. I'm a conservationist, I'm conservative about values, and I'm progressive about thinking about new things.
Discuss your pro or con views of extending the sewer into the Rattlesnake. Cass, you're first.
Well, I'm certainly all for water quality. I think all of us, I don't think anybody in this room is not for water quality, for public health. And sewers are directly related to that. That's what they're for. And I'm for that. I think we had an issue in the Rattlesnake about sewers, but I don't think it was necessarily about water quality and about public health. I think it was about infill and about increasing capacity for densities. So I think we need to separate those two issues because they don't mix very well. Public safety is public safety, and I'm for that. I'm for water quality and I'm for health. Anytime that's an issue and sewers the solution to that, I'm going to support that. But if it's put together and presented to the way it was to the Rattlesnake residents, then it becomes very convoluted and disturbing to people because there's lack of trust to the local government by the way it was done and maybe for the intentions of why it was done. When it doesn't conflict with the people's desires of densities in their ward, if it's really a water quality issue, then we need to distinguish that. That is still clouded. And I would not have voted against the wishes of that many people in the Rattlesnake. I can guarantee you that.
My bottom line is definitely the quality of the Missoula aquifer, which we all depend on for drinking water here in the Missoula Valley. I would have supported SID 528, and for a few reasons. As I go around the neighborhood, as I go around through the ward, I hear folks oppose the sewer for basically 3 reasons. 1, cost. 2, the science is not there to support sewering. And 3, the fear that a sewer extension will precipitate growth and push us down a growth trajectory that we don't want to go. I'm not insensitive to any of those concerns, but I think it is vitally important that we separate out some of these issues. This is a complex concern, and I don't think it's necessarily black or white. As far as the first issue goes, cost, I think we should do as a community everything that we can do to mitigate cost and make sure that the burden is not excessive on those who can least afford it. For those who own larger parcels of property, I'd want to investigate such means as conservation easements or other mechanisms to ensure that folks don't feel as though their only option is to sell out because the assessment is too high. I believe the science is there from the data that I've seen. Groundwater and surface water quality are degraded the further down the Rattlesnake watershed you get. It might not have reached unsafe drinking levels yet, but it certainly is pushing us in that direction, and certainly we are exceeding what's acceptable in terms of groundwater quality. As far as growth and development goes, I want to make sure that we don't build infrastructure that is more than what is necessary to service how we want to see an area look in the future.
If elected, how will you keep connected with the residents in Ward 1? What specific methods would you set in place to easily allow constituents to dialogue with you or over issues of concern? Dave?
Well, first off, I would want to make myself more visible. This has been a great opportunity in the campaign season here to get around and chat with folks at their doorstep, even though most of folks are out doing what folks should be doing during the summer, recreating and not necessarily at home waiting for a candidate to knock on the door. But certainly, I would want to do my best to try to get around and visit with folks at their homes. What's their issues? What's their concerns? What's their vision for Missoula? I think a newsletter is an idea that I'm not sure has been, maybe it has been implemented in Missoula and I'm not aware of, but I think candidates communicating directly with constituents, giving reasons why they voted one way or another is important. Without that, folks are left to surmise what's going through the mind of a candidate, and I would want to maybe cut through some of that supposition a little bit. And certainly community events such as this. Let's have forums where both council members are present periodically, and maybe that's a separate forum other than neighborhood councils or neighborhood associations. Just fireside chat with the candidate. I don't know. I think the sky is the limit, but let's be creative, and I'd like to hear from you all as far as how you think it would be better to interact with and be involved with your city council representation.
That's really a good question. I call it citizen rights. And as a person who's been on the other side of the podium for a while, that has to go up and try to rush things in if I can get it in 3 minutes on city council. And I watched the abuse, and over the last 10 years, I watched the citizens in this community go in front of their local elected officials and not get the time of day and be told that they're talking too long, not be allowed to ask a question at a committee meeting. Well, that's changed, and I was involved in helping change some of that. A judge finally said what I said 4 years ago when I ran, that we're not being allowed as citizens to speak. It's getting better. And how would I do that personally to help you, to empower you to get to your elected officials? One, I have 3 phone numbers, and I have a cell phone, and I'm not going to hide that from you. They're available. My cell phone, which is the easiest way, is 880-7516. It's a very effective way to get to me. If I am asked, I don't think people want to go to any extra meetings. Nobody does. But you have enough meetings that are going on in this community, in this ward. If I'm asked to come so that you guys can pin my ears back or ask me a question, I will come. I'll show up. If you call me, I'll talk to you or I'll call you back. If you have a real problem, and I used to do this when I was in city council, and you don't see this very often. You have a problem downtown, and it seems like possibly a real problem, I will go with you to the department, with you, and we'll discuss it with where you think your problem is. And that's about the best I can do, is be available and advocate for you, especially if you have something that for you is important.
Here's a short one. What is your stance on occupancy standards?
I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin. I graduated from there in 1969. It's one of the most progressive university towns in the world, which progressive means that they really are sensitive to everybody. They try to be fair. They have an occupancy standard. So does every other progressive university town in this country. And there's a reason for it. The rights of renters and the rights of the people that live in the neighborhood have to be balanced. And that's how you do it. And so if I'm elected, I will support an occupancy standard. And I think we need one. It's been long overdue.
I think basically what we're trying to ensure by occupancy standards or other mechanisms is that our own personal space where we live is not invaded or disturbed in an adverse way. But I don't think occupancy standards are the way to deal with those problems. I think basically occupancy standards verge on being discriminatory. I, as a college student, did not choose to live in densely populated apartments, but due to financial constraints, found myself living with several other unrelated men who sometimes I wish I had not been living with at the time. But nonetheless, I think there are mechanisms and means to approach and to deal with some of the social ills that we see going on in our neighborhoods without imposing an occupancy standard on our community. I'd be open for suggestions how to make that work, but certainly I can stand here tonight and say that I don't think that an occupancy standard is the solution.
According to a recent report by Colorado College entitled, quote, State of the Rockies, Missoula is the 7th most polluted city in the Rockies. My question, how do you personally care for the environment? Examples: fuel-efficient vehicles, no pesticides on the lawn, buy local products. Dave?
I do buy local products. As some of which is moose drool and local beverages as such. I think that's an important part of our local economy. Sustainability, it goes back to that. I want to do my best in city government within the sidebars of our decision space within city government to promote local businesses and not feel as if we need to bend over backwards to entice large outside corporations to come in here and be our silver bullet. Let's do what we can to support the farmers markets that we have in town, other mechanisms to encourage local small business in the downtown area, throughout town. I shop at the markets. I try my best to shop and purchase locally produced products. I have a few more dandelions in my yard than some of my neighbors do. I don't like seeing those little pesticide signs stuck in people's yards. I think that is yet another contaminant that works its way into the groundwater, and we should do our best to eliminate as much as possible such toxins from our systems here. Other forms of pollution, air pollution. Folks aren't going to like to hear this, but I think we need to think seriously about emission standards for vehicles. We have some unique conditions here in the Missoula Valley with our inversions and whatnot. We've gotten rid of the teepee burners and some notorious points of emission into our atmosphere, but our vehicles are going to be with us for a while, and I don't suspect that we're all going to transfer to non-motorized transportation overnight. So let's deal with the types of transportation that we have and make it cleaner burning. I've got a couple Toyota vehicles. They don't get great mileage, but they get better mileage than some of the Humvees I see driving around town.
Would you please read that again, that question?
According to a recent report by Colorado College entitled The State of the Rockies, Missoula is the 7th most polluted city in the Rockies. My question is, how do you personally care for the environment?
Well, I personally care for the environment. I have an organic yard. The whole yard. It's never had any pesticides in it. I have an organic garden. So I personally care for the environment there. I'm on the sewer. I've been on the sewer probably for 100 years there. I don't know. The Lower Rattlesnake. I don't burn wood anymore. I walk for my recreation in the evening. I don't drive places. I do a walk. But I think that the issue that concerns me is what I wanted to read that again, is that Missoula is the 7th most polluted. That's of concern to me because I wasn't aware that if that's correct, that we're that bad. And that concerns me. Well, I think something that, personally I try to live a pretty organic, responsible life. I even recycle now because everybody's made me feel so guilty for not doing it. And so now I feel better that I'm doing it. But I think there's something we can do immediately in this community to help the air quality, which I think we're talking about now. We might be talking about aquifer pollution too, but I'm not sure that's documented yet. But we have a bus system that we spend millions of dollars a year, and we get a revenue of about $140,000 a year out of it. I think we should make the bus system free, so they're filled, so they're used, and it'll make a difference in the air quality. I think that's one thing that we can do immediately to improve the pollution aspects in here. We're going to have more problems again. It's growth management. More people, more pollution. And we do have a concern about our aquifer in this community in a lot of different areas. And so it's water and air, and that's one of the issues you'll see on my sign, water and air quality. That's the bottom line in the long run. We got to be careful about that.
Van Buren Street is becoming more crowded and noisier. As the upper rattlesnake continues to grow, Van Buren will get worse. How would you deal with this development problem? Cass, I think it's your turn.
As it relates to Van Buren, is that what we think we're talking about here? Van Buren has been an issue since I was on council, and the engineers have wanted to make that 4 lanes for 30 years. And they still do. And which I think would be a disaster. It would just facilitate more cars going faster and more pollution. I think that's where the Broadway type diet thing, with 1 lane of traffic, with turns and bicycles and safety things for the pedestrians, would work well. 1 lane of traffic with turn places and nice bikeways on both sides. That's what I'd like to see for Van Buren in the long run personally. Whether it would happen, I don't know. I think if we build 4 lanes there, which you can, you're going to have 5 times the problem within 5 years. And so it's a growth management thing. And I remember I heard John Engen say something I agreed. You build the roads bigger, they'll just fill them real quick. I agree with you, John.
Well, I think the same scenario plays itself out not only on Van Buren Street, but over on Greeno and Duncan Drive. I think we need to think seriously about what is the potential build-out in the upper Rattlesnake, and by that I mean with existing zoning, with existing plans on the books, how many potential new homes and potential new vehicles might we see coming down each of those arterials. If that exceeds what we think is acceptable, then I think we need to go back and rethink our comprehensive plan and zoning and adjust it accordingly so that the development that occurs matches the infrastructure. If we don't, we're going to have an unbalance such that there's a lot more capacity for growth than infrastructure will provide. And if we don't want 4 lanes going up either of our major arterials, then maybe we need to rethink the growth in the upper end of the valley. Right now, I think Cass is exactly right. We need to look at such modifications as ensuring that we have bike lanes, possibly turning lanes, and other engineering mechanisms that both provide for safety and efficient transportation for both motorized and non-motorized transportation alike.
Rezoning requires public process. Most of us participate but aren't heard by our city council. The developers seem to get what they want with bonuses to boot. How will you ensure that public process is heard and taken into account? Dave?
Well, some of the growth management tools that have been used and have caused so much controversy in our community over the past few years are currently on the shelf. So hopefully we can move forward constructively in envisioning what we can do to manage growth in a way that does not exclude or alienate members of our community. I think one of the concerns folks have had is that some developments have occurred administratively without adequate public involvement, and I won't disagree with that. I think as we move forward in the future, let's think about ways in which public members can be involved meaningfully in the decision-making process and early in the decision-making process. Too often, I, as probably others in this room, have found out about some proposal, be that a development, be that some other issue, at the 11th hour, and you race down to City Hall, and you do literally have your 3 minutes at the microphone, and by that time, too often, I think, council members' minds have crystallized into what they want to decide on a given issue. So yes, I think those development tools that might allow for broader public participation, such as PUDs, I think are worth thinking about, and I think I would like to replicate those in whatever decision-making process we have that deals with growth and development in particular.
The issue of the public not being listened to, it's probably one of the hardest things when you're a member of the public, when you take your time out to get involved in an issue and go downtown and sit there in the audience and wait for your turn, or when you are actually legally directly affected and you're in a protest zone, you sign a protest, and the protest reaches the amount of people where it's supposed to kick in a supermajority for the council to make that decision. Well, we've all experienced this in the last decade where we feel like our voices have been whittled away at on these growth issues and zoning issues. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is when Mike Cadiz was elected, he hurried to the next session of the legislature to make sure that it wasn't 9 votes they had to get, it was only 8. And also tried to water down the ability for the protests around there. There was a definite intention to take away the leverage that you have in your neighborhoods about zoning changes or proposed zoning. And that's one of the reasons I got active as I am now, because I felt that too. And it was very upsetting. And what is even more upsetting is that the process we've gone through with this infill, a lot of it was illegal, and we tried to tell them that because we could read the law. And so it's a deep issue. This is one of the things that has divided this community, is the public not being listened to. And it's quite obvious, and it's very upsetting. That's an issue with me. I will listen.
Do you know of the house being built in the Lincoln Hills Elk Saddle Corridor? And what are your views on this?
It's a damn shame they weren't able to negotiate that when they bought that. Because it's there and it's being developed and it's a problem. Sad. The city did try. I will grant them, and you know that, Luann, you tried as hard as you could to get that. The people wouldn't cooperate. And the access issue is being addressed by the city. They're trying to arrange it so they come in from the other side so they don't have to go across. That will be a problem. It's not a positive thing for the animals. The city is I will give the city credit. The people are trying to do it properly. The people in the conservation groups have been negotiating. The city did try to buy that acreage that was not attainable.
I don't have enough of the details to give a competent answer on this one, but I will say that as a city council member, I will advocate for another open space bond in the next 4 years That might not have helped in this case. If property owners dig their heels in and are not willing to sell for the sake of open space, then so be it. But I think we need to have that tool available to preserve and protect and conserve those remaining areas of prime open space surrounding our community.
I don't have any more questions here. Does somebody have one or two they want to pass up? If not, we could go on and pass it up, please, then.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not written.
Okay, we want them written. That stops lectures. Okay, I think we can go to your closing statements, what you'd like your potential constituents to know after this discussion. Cass, I think you start first this time.
I really want to thank you all for coming here tonight. It was a beautiful evening. I'm sure it wasn't easy to come and sit in a room when the moon's probably coming up in a little while and it's still warm out. But this is an incredibly important election this year across the board. There's really 6 council seats really up. There's a mayor's race that's very important. We're at crossroads in this community, and it's very important that you think about your vote and you vote for the person you think will be most effective in dealing with. We have a lot of difficult problems. This is like every other community around the country that's growing. We obviously think Ward 1 is unique and special in the Valley. I do personally. I'm very prejudiced about that. But we have a lot here in Ward 1 with the downtown, with the Hellgate, with the Rattlesnake to really take care of. And it's going to be difficult. We have a tremendous amount of money coming into this community. And money is speaking. And it's starting to run this town big time. And the elections cost a lot of money because the PACs have a lot of money. And there's political machines out there that have a lot of money. And so you have to be very careful to read between the lines of who you're voting for and who's supporting these people and why. And I am fairly an open book in this community. I have a long history here. Most of it's been pretty positive. I've stumbled once, but I'm in a very good place in my life. I'm going to be 62 in another 2 weeks. I'm in my prime. I understand how to do these things. I also understand what doesn't work, and that puts me edge ahead of a lot of other people. And if I get in, I will represent you well. I'll be available to you, and I will listen. And I'll probably get a lot of good ideas from you.
Given the scale and pace of change that we're seeing in our community, we are at a critical point. The next 4 years will determine how this community looks for decades into the future. And in that process, it's important not to lose sight of the forest for the trees. There's lots of important issues, but I think we need to be focused on who we want to be as a community, what constitutes the heart and soul of this community, which we love so dearly, which is called Missoula. For me, one of the means to get there is this concept of sustainability, making sure we live within our means, take care of the people in this community, take care of the land, because out of that relationship between land and people has arisen this culture, this unique culture in the Missoula Valley. I bring to this job experience as a nature writer, experience in the realm of public involvement with the U.S. Forest Service. I've sat on the tracks of an idling D8 cat trying to negotiate with a private landowner whether or not to try to protect his property from advancing flame fronts or to run that cat through a wilderness study area. I know what it's like to negotiate, to work together. It's not enough merely to have passion about issues, as important as that is. We're at a point in our history of Missoula and Missoula city government where we need to both have passion and have a willingness and ability to work together with other people creatively and constructively and move this community ahead in a good way into the 21st century. I'd ask for your vote on November 8th, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Okay, I see Luann Crowley has been here. I don't see John Eng. Okay. Would you each like to come up and give people a 3-minute pitch on why they should elect you for mayor?
How many minutes?
3. And here's our timer.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity at 8:30 almost on a beautiful evening. My name's John Engen. I'm running for mayor of my hometown, the city of Missoula. I know many of the faces in this room and some unfamiliar faces as well. My campaign stump speech doesn't change much from time to time, and poor Luann has heard it a lot. She loves it, which is very kind.
I could give it.
That's what we ought to do, is give each other, is for the fun of it sometime. And it's fairly simple, and I'm interested in 3 significant issues. I think the community has an opportunity in 2006 to duplicate a fantastic effort and pass another open space bond. Our last one in 1995, which cost the community about $4.5 million, purchased many valuable acres, and we're lucky in Ward 1 to be the folks who get to enjoy some of that largesse. Mount Jumbo, for example, in cooperation with private landowners and public land trusts, Mount Sentinel, the North Hills, we have tremendous community assets here through our open spaces, and I think we have a shot at acquiring more of those lands, preserving and protecting them for ourselves and our children. Second, I'm interested in housing for our community. And that housing comes in all forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be big houses with big yards. In some cases, it's small houses with small yards. It's housing for everybody. It's housing for old folks. It's housing for young people. It's housing for families. It's an opportunity, I think, to become a middle-class person in our community, to have a stake in our community, and to have some of the opportunity to participate in a comfortable life that lets you do lots of things like raise decent kids, educate them, care for aging parents, have wonderful marriages, fantastic friendships, and to serve your community either through volunteerism or through doling out a little money once in a while. A middle-class existence, I think, is something that is okay for all of us, and is something I've certainly been lucky enough to enjoy, and I think other folks ought to be able to enjoy that too. Home ownership, I think, is a big part of that. And finally, you've heard tonight about our rules and regulations under a number of difficult circumstances. I think we have an opportunity to work together to modify our rules and regulations so that they make pretty good sense for most of the community most of the time. We've learned, I think, from some of our mistakes, and I think we'll continue to learn from our mistakes. Our ability to talk to each other about the way we do business, and our ability to legislate and create policy rather than litigate, I think will go a long way towards serving our community. That may be, well, thank you, John. Now that's a timekeeper.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk fast. Before I start, I do have to say, you have to go up here?
To get on MCAT, you do.
Oh, well, never mind. Oh, I got to tease somebody. I'll tell you what, it's been a real pleasure listening to other people answer questions. I'll just say a little bit. I really haven't developed that stump speech because every situation is so different. But I'll tell you what, after 9 years of being on council, it's become clear to me that we can't continue on with business as usual. There's just too much at stake. We've experienced a top-down approach to things, and it hasn't worked. In fact, it's divided this town. My goal is to bring an open, accessible, and accountable government to the people. To be open. You know, you guys talked a lot about neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are one of the most important and amazing assets we have. And that's one of the biggest differences between John and myself. I feel like we've been experimenting with our infill policies, and we've learned what works and what doesn't, but in general, I started voting against them because the goal seemed to be, or the goal we were told we would reach would be affordable housing, and we would stop sprawl. And when we found that wasn't working, I said, no, that's enough. Let's have a moratorium. But I don't believe John's made a subdivision or an infill decision he didn't like. I want to get on, talk real quickly. How much time do I have? Minute and a half. Leash laws and the beatings. We're bringing in the police tomorrow to talk about the beatings. This is stunning. It's incredibly upsetting that this is happening in our town. This does not feel like Missoula. And we have to get back to the root cause and find out what's going on. The Bitterroot Branch, yes, let's do it. We've asked MRL. They've told us millions and millions of dollars. They have to change the rail. It doesn't handle passenger cars. But I think they must feel that their time is coming, and they might be open to that. How would I stay in touch? I've talked a lot about having a monthly call-in show for the mayor so that you get to know every month, this is what we did last month, this is what we're planning on doing. What do you think? We want your input. We want to connect with you. People have felt disconnected from their government. Why do you think we have 23% turnout? It's time that we bring people back. I've run, and the reason I got involved was my voice felt like it wasn't being heard when there was a rezoning in my town, in my neighborhood. And so when I got on council, I was able to empathize with the people who do go through that process, an incredibly stressful process if you don't know the rules, if you don't know the language. So you need somebody to advocate for you, and that's what I'll do. Van Buren Street. The ideas are great. You guys have some fantastic ideas. The only thing I'd add is boulevard sidewalks and beautiful trees. Stop. Thank you very much.
Remember, if you want to hear these two debate, the league is sponsoring on November 3rd. It'll be live on MCAT at the school board meeting, which is wired for direct broadcast. So that'll be on November 3rd if you want to hear them talk. 7, I think. I assume it's at 7. It's when they usually are. I'd like to thank you for attending and asking us to do it. I did want to say that 2 of our male members are here, the League of Women Voters and all women. We have John Fletcher and Frank Fletcher. Here are the pamphlets that I talked about. If you want to get an absentee ballot form, it's here. Or remember, you can go to the courthouse and vote right then. There's some on. The league has put out a publication on all of the committees and government offices in the county. There are a few copies of the bond issue for the fire department. There's some forms to register or change your address, although it won't work for this election. And so help yourself to any of these, and don't forget to vote.